2, 1. Just the Jail's Head, Book 1, Bloodkin, by Kathy Etchett. Chapter 20! When we arrived back at the hall, Min Eve had a surprise for us. You lot have been invited to the banquet tonight. What? The royal banquet? Talgoth was incredulous, his eyes wide. The very same. I don't know how Mer Roderick swung it. The man has friends in high places, she sighed. You're expected at the castle at 6, so you'd best go make yourself presentable. Talgoth let out a whoop of excitement and raced up the stairs. Lalitha Dunkel and I looked at each other, and Lalitha shrugged. Better go have a bath then. We followed Talgoth upstairs. When I'd bathed and got into my good robe, I debated whether to wear my fancy court shoes. But even though the day had been warm, the streets were probably still slippery, and the walk home afterwards would be cold. So I decided against them and put my boots on instead. Since I had arrived at the hall, my hair had grown down past my shoulders, and I wondered briefly if I had time for a cut. Probably not, I decided, and found Charlie in the bathroom and applying his kohl in the mirror. Hey Charlie, do you have a hair tie I could borrow? And do you think maybe I could use some kohl? Hell, I was dressing up for the Queen. I might as well go all out. And if it was good enough for Charlie, it was good enough for me. He raised an eyebrow at me in the mirror, but thankfully didn't say anything. He retrieved 2 hair ties from a small jar beside the sink and handed one to me. It was a thin band of black elastic, and I followed Charlie's motions as he tied back his hair. Want a ribbon too? No thanks. That's probably a bit much. Charlie grinned and shrugged, pulling out his black velvet ribbon from the jar, tying it in a bow around the elastic holding his hair. Now, Cole, take this jazz and line around the inside of your lashes. He handed me the kohl pencil. It was like a thick black crayon encased in wood and had been freshly sharpened. Slowly and carefully, I drew it over the inner rims of my eyes, top and bottom. Now, hold this under your top lashes and blink down on it. He held out what looked like a tiny wand. The bristles on one end shone with liquid kohl. What's this? Huh, you human boys really don't know much, do you? It's mascarole. It darkens your eyelashes. Although yours aren't white like mine, it helps finish the look, if you will. Opening my eyes wide in front of the mirror, I held the tiny brush under my top lashes and blinked, the movement of my lids dragging them through the brush and coating them with black. I stood back to admire my reflection. Hell, I look pretty decent. I mean, I'd never considered myself good looking. If I thought about it, I guess I could say that Charlie was handsome. Samok and maybe Donick too. Even Dunkel could be considered attractive by women, in his overgrown, gangly, geeky way, with his almost white spiky hair and blue eyes magnified by his spectacles. Talgoth had a face only a mother could love, but I really had never put much thought into my own appearance. Now, with my good robe on and my hair tied back, I thought I looked pretty good. My jaw looked strong, accentuated by the little bit of dark blonde facial hair I had allowed to grow over the holiday, and my eyes, rimmed with kohl, looked big and really blue. Charlie looked over at me in the mirror, and, noticing me checking myself out, turned around. You scrub up alright, eh? Trying to impress someone? I blushed, ruining the effect. My skin was pretty fair, and I hadn't realised until now how truly obvious it was when I blushed. Of course not. I've just never been to a royal banquet before. Sure. Charlie sounded less than convinced as he turned back to the mirror. Would you look at us? We make quite a pair, don't you think? We kind of did, I thought, as I looked at us both in the mirror. Though Charlie was a good foot taller than me, but for his grey skin and red eyes, with our makeup on and our hair tied back, we could almost have been brothers. When we were ready, we met the others down in the reception. Talgoth was shuffling his feet self-consciously, and one look at his face told me why. He had obviously had the same idea I did, because his eyes were rimmed with black, and his normally orange eyelashes were darkened with mascarole. I laughed at him, and he crossed his arms offensively. What? It's a special occasion, and all the Niathi guys... Oh, nice work, Jazz. He had finally noticed that I'd gotten to my mentor's coal as well. You guys are idiots. You look ridiculous, Dunkel grumbled, but I could totally see he wished he had thought of putting some on himself as well. Now, my dears, you had better get yourself down to the castle, Mineve announced. Have a lovely time, but remember that you are representing the hall and the academy, so don't do anything stupid. This last seemed to be aimed at Talgoth, who grinned cheekily. Of course not. Thomas will keep me in line, won't you, old boy? Thomas sighed and raised his eyes to the heavens. Try as I do, I am still only one man. It would take an army of mentors to keep you in line, Geth. Lalitha giggled. Come on, you silly boys. We've got a banquet to get to. We crossed the bridge to the castle in the midst of other clumps of guests, all dressed in their absolute finest. At the archway, a liveried official checked our names against a list of invitees he held in his hand. Satisfied we were supposed to be there, he waved us through. Inside the castle gates, a great courtyard spread almost the entire width of the island. An abundance of torches hung in brackets from the walls, illuminating the watchful faces of the guards who patrolled along the top. More torches set into the ground created an avenue from the gateway to the huge open doors of the castle itself. Its massive stone walls stretched up against the black, starlit sky. It really was an imposing entrance. Round towers squatted at each end of the main facade, and light shone from slits of windows that stretched up many floors. Behind the square blocks at the top of the front of the castle, numerous smaller turrets poked upwards. The castle had always been there, visible from my room at the hall, but I'd barely given it much thought since I'd moved to Lille. Now, faced with the prospect of actually going inside, I rather wished I had. Another official met us at the castle door, checking our names against another list, indicating which way we were to proceed. The entrance hall was huge. The walls were hung with glorious tapestries, and rows of great pillars supported the roof. Down the end of the hall, we walked to the door on the far right side that the official had indicated, and we were met by a little female page that ushered us through into our assigned seats. The banquet hall was wide, with tables set up along the walls. On the far side, the Queen's table was on a slightly raised dais. Our table was tucked in the corner, about as far away from the royal table as it was possible to be. Although candelabra glowed down the middle of each table, and large freestanding versions lined the walls, the ceiling was hung with huge globes, shining down their soft ambience. The other tables gradually filled as we sat and waited. More of the little pages had run around, pouring glasses of wine and water, and conversation increased the noise levels in the room to a steady hum. Suddenly, the big doors behind the royal table swung open, and the now hushed crowd rose to its feet. There was the Queen, on the arm of her advisor, followed by an expensively dressed couple. The Lord of Lady of Lille, I guessed. Everyone sat as the Queen took her seat in the middle of the royal table, and conversations resumed. I looked about the room as the first course was served. Delicate slivers of spiced fish in a creamy sauce on a decorative bed of lettuce. I don't know why, but I was surprised to see Hanyash at the next table along from the Queen's dais. Silly, I told myself. Of course she would be there. She is the High Priestess of Lille, after all. Among the numerous faceless politicians and influential people of Lille, I saw a striking blonde couple. The woman looked so much like Sella, my heart skipped a beat, but I realized that they were probably her parents. Sella herself had apparently not received an invite. She'll kick herself when she realized she could have come if she'd stayed at the hall, I thought to myself, a little guiltily. The plates were cleared, and a second course, then a third and fourth were served. I tried to concentrate on my food and what the others were saying, but my eyes kept creeping up to stare at the Queen. She was wearing a Niathi-style robe in royal blue, edged with expensive gold thread, with a high upturned collar instead of a hood. Her hair had been pulled back into a complicated knot, and on her head sat a delicate golden crown, set with sapphires that winked in the candlelight. I could see her talking to the Lord of Lil. Well, being talked at, really, but her eyes discreetly roamed the room. Suddenly, she looked directly at me, hidden in the corner as I was, and I ducked my head, embarrassed that she'd seen me staring. I chanced to look back up, but her gaze had already moved on, although I think I detected the faintest smile tugging at her lips. Shit. Oi! What's wrong, Jazz? You hot? You've gone all pink. Bloody Talgoth. Nothing. The Queen just looked at me. Talgoth guffawed disbelievingly. Sure she did. Hey, she was probably looking at me. Man, I wish I'd seen. You should have waved. I would have waved. Like hell he would have, I thought. To be caught by those clear slate blue eyes was to be frozen in place, stupefied. I thought of Selma again, and the guilt twinged. I shouldn't be thinking about the Queen like that. Hell, I probably shouldn't be thinking about her at all. But she was so immeasurably calm and regal and sort of otherworldly. She had been assessed by Niathi and voted into office by a majority of her people. And they can't all have been wrong. This woman was special. When the courses had been consumed and the dishes cleared away, the pages had circulated, offering coffees and sweet dessert wines. As the last little page had skipped from the banquet hall, Queen Thealik rose and the assembly hushed expectantly. Dear people of Lil, firstly, on behalf of my advisor, I would like to thank you all for this marvellous welcome. Her voice was low and warm, but carried over the polite applause of the gathered crowd. As we saw the sun set on the old year this night, tomorrow will see it rise on a new one. My hope is that it will bring peace and prosperity to the people of the city, and indeed the whole country. And we are honoured to look forward to enjoying it with you, my people of Lil. The applause was much less polite this time, so emphatic was the crowd in its approval of the Queen's words. I felt something stir within me, a kind of hope, excitement, maybe. This last year felt like it had only begun more than halfway through, when Charlie turned up at the manor that fateful late summer afternoon. The months at the hall had been crazy, busy, overwhelming at times, but the weirdness that still lingered about the incident on Samhain and the still raw wound of Odette's death seemed momentarily to dissipate. I wondered briefly if the Queen was using Hjarvan to emphasize her words, but no, she was not Niathi blood. The sparks of hope I felt was simply from the power of her words. The Queen and her advisor were here. Here! This new year could not help but be amazing. I was suddenly sure of it. Please, let us all relax and enjoy some entertainment. Peace be with you all. So mote it be. The Queen helped her advisor to his feet, and they led the Lord of Lady and Lil through the door behind the dais. Courtiers moved in and shifted their table back and out to the side, and through the door the Queen had just left by, a group of musicians entered and began to set up on the raised platform. I recognised them immediately as they began to play. They were O'Malley's group of Niathi Bloods from Allion that had commanded the headlining slot at the Shivering Thistle for the past few months. It looked as if the party was going to stretch into the night, at least until midnight, when we would officially celebrate the turning of the year. Chairs were scraped back on the tiled floor as guests began to mingle. The mentors went over to speak to an important-looking group of Niathi officials, and I leaned back in my chair, seriously full, and possibly a little drunk, after the quantity of good jail's head wine that had been served with dinner. So, what do you think? Talgoth asked me. Of what? Of what? The Queen, you idiot! Oh. She seems nice? Nice? He exclaimed. Fucking hell, Jez. You certainly are a man of understatement, aren't you? Letha, your opinion of our beloved monarch? Lalitha was clearly a bit drunk at this point too, because she sighed dreamily. Well, I wouldn't kick her out of bed for farting. Wow. Talgoth gasped a laugh. Well put, my friend. Well put indeed. I noticed movement out in the banquet hall as from a side door the Queen and her advisor appeared with the Lord and Lady of Lille. They moved through the assembled crowd into the centre of the room, in front of the musicians. There they began to dance in their pairs, slow, formal movements. I couldn't keep my eyes from the Queen as her blue robe swirled about her figure and the light glinted off the crown on her head. Other couples went to join in the dance, and Jimmy bounded over. Lalitha, my pet, a dance for your dear old mentor? She shrugged and stood, taking Jim's proffered hand. Right, your mentor can have the first one, then you're mine. Talgoth warned her, and she snorted. Not if I can help it. You'll break all the bones of my feet. We watched as Jimmy led her on, placing one hand on her waist and guiding her in a graceful waltz. We sipped down wine and watched the pairs of dancers. Between every song they bowed to each other, then swapped partners. I caught glimpses of the Queen. After dancing with her advisor, she danced with the Lord of Lille, then the man who I thought was Sella's father, then on and on. I saw Hanyash, conspicuous with her bald head and bright yellow robes, dancing with the city's lord, then the Queen's advisor, then Charlie, who had somehow eased his way into the thick of things. The evening was getting late, and I realised that I was in dire need of a bathroom. I looked about and sighted one of the pages, a little girl of no more than 10, struggling to stay awake in a chair by the door. She pointed out the direction of the bathrooms to me, and I staggered off gratefully. When I returned, before I could get back to Talgoth and Dunku at our seats, I heard someone call my name. I saw Hanyash staring at me, and she waved me over. Lady, this is Lord's Ear Jacinth of Jailshead. And there I was, pinned by the full force of those slate blue eyes. Your Majesty? I tried to bow. Queen Thaalik smiled at me, and my right knee wobbled as I tried to stand up straight. Please, call me Thaalik. Oh, yes. My apologies, Lady Thaalik. Her smile showed off straight, even teeth, and she nodded, as if to acknowledge my reluctance to call her simply by her first name. She was the Queen, after all. I couldn't just call her Thaalik. It wouldn't be right. Hanyash glowed her smile at me. Now, the advisor and I have some things to discuss. Ow. I hadn't even noticed the tiny old man standing with the two women. Shit! I bowed at him quickly, and his lips puckered in a little octogenarian grin as Hanyash introduced him as Mer Sebastian. So, if you wouldn't mind entertaining our lady, that would be most appreciated. Hanyash took the arm of the advisor and led him off to some seats, and although the room was full of people, I was suddenly alone with the Queen. Please, Lord Jacinth, if you wouldn't mind, perhaps we could find some seating for ourselves. I fear all this dancing has rather worn my feet out. I blinked. Seriously, just Jacinth will do, Your Majesty. She glanced at me sideways as I stumbled a bit over her title, and she smiled, her cheeks dimpling slightly. Jacinth it is, then. I understand you're studying at the academy. Holy shit. Hanyash had told her about me? I was so not prepared for this. Yes. I'm, Niathi blood. So might I be so bold as to inquire whether you follow the Niathi custom of using moss? Hell, she was the Queen. She could be as bold as she liked. What was I supposed to say? Should I offer her some? Shit! Yeah, we all do, really. Would you like some? She smiled politely, but those clear eyes that held mine glittered with fun. Yes, thank you, Jesseth. That would be most kind. I would appreciate some gold if you have any. I nodded and thanked the memory of Queen Little Bitch that I had thought to bring my pipe and pouches of moss. Good. Please, come with me. I believe there's somewhere we can go this way. She led me through the crowd to a small door in the side wall. She murmured to the liveried guard standing beside her, and he opened it for us with a small bow. Bow! It led straight through an antechamber that opened into a small walled garden. Perfectly clipped yew trees stood in each of the corners, and though it was open to the night air, the braziers that burned brightly between them meant that it was not unpleasantly cold. Elegant wrought-iron chairs clustered around a small circular table. I remembered my manners and pulled out one for her, and she sat gracefully. I sat beside her and pulled out my pouch, setting down my pipe and packing it from the gold bag of moss before sparking it with Yavin and passing it to her. I have never been so grateful I could do that as she accepted the pipe, her sculpted eyebrows raised, impressed. So, Lord's heir of Jaleshead, I do hope you approved of the wine on offer here tonight, she said as she exhaled delicately. Yeah, very much so, thank you. She chuckled, a deep, sweet sound. I'm terribly sorry. How boring of me. You must get that all the time. My lady? She looked at me straight as she held the pipe out to me, and I shivered a little as my fingers brushed her. What the hell was going on with me? It must be the first thing anyone says to you when they learn you're from Jaleshead. Oh, the wine thing. Yeah, I get that a lot. But I don't mind. Not from her, anyway. So, you've been in Lille almost half a year? She guessed, and I nodded. Is your mentor here tonight? Charlie? Yeah, he's here. What's he like? And Queen Thalic drew me into the conversation. I told her all about Charlie, and when he had come to Jaleshead to lead me. She chuckled as I described my father's reaction to the Nathi. Yes, the hereditary lords of this land do tend to be a bit traditional, but that's what makes them so good at what they do. I had never heard anyone praise the rigid traditionalism of my father, which I had always found stuffily oppressive, but the Queen's tacit approval made me feel something like pride for my father. She asked more questions in that low, honeyed voice, gently slurred with a hint of a Western accent, undeniably sexy, and I found myself chattering animatedly. I told her about my friends at the hall, the classes we had had, and our Hjaven practice. When something piqued her curiosity, she would question me about it, and I found myself telling her all about moss, how we had visited Fiona's hydroponic setup, even pointing out on my pipe why it was made of wood and had a long mouthpiece. I stopped talking to pack the pipe again and realised with horror that I was talking the ears off the Queen. The Queen! And that, apart from her interested question, she had barely had a chance to get a word in edgeways. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, my tongue seems to have gotten away on me. I'm not usually like this, you know. She smiled that half-dimpled smile and accepted the spark pipe. Oh, I'm sure, Lord Jesseth. Wait, what? Was she doing it on purpose? In response to my accusing look, she laughed and threw her hands up, mocked offensively. Why? You're fascinating, Jesseth. And it is a queen's duty to learn as much about her subjects as she can. Gosh, she thought I was fascinating. I had poured out my life story and she had found it fascinating. Thalic really was a remarkable woman. Anyone can be fascinating, Jesseth. You just have to ask the right questions. My face must have fallen. Of course, I wasn't unique in my fascination for the Queen. I was just one idiot who happened to have some moss in a pipe. She saw this and smiled gently. There are, of course, those who are more interesting than others. My insides clenched again as she looked at me with that clear, slate-blue gaze. I do hope in the coming year there will be more occasions for us to continue this conversation. She handed the pipe back to me and went to stand. I almost knocked over my chair in my haste to assist her. For now, I am afraid I must return to my people. The countdown to midnight will begin soon. I suddenly dreaded going back inside, where she would return to being the focus of everyone's attention. But she took my extended arm and we walked back through the antechamber and the door to the banquet hall. She smelled like vanilla and musk and the sweet tang of moss smoke, delicate, delicious, beside me. And thank you, Jezeth. This has been most entertaining. She reached up and kissed me gently on the cheek, and I watched her go, swallowed up by her adoring crowd while I stood, rooted to the spot, my cheek tingling where her lips had touched it, but otherwise quite unable to move. Hey, Jez, there you are. Everyone's been looking for you. I dragged my eyes away from the direction the Queen had gone to see Dunkel, his face flushed with wine and his hair slightly more messy than usual. Talgoth came up beside him and poked me in the shoulder. Oi! Where have you been? I shook my head in amazement. You seriously would not believe me if I told you. He shrugged. Yeah, come on. It's almost time for the countdown. Charlie's looking for you. Talgoth pulled me into the crowd as the musicians announced that it was 1 minute to midnight. Jazz, where have you been? Charlie grabbed me and hugged me around the shoulders. I've been, hanging out with the Queen. He grinned in surprise. No way! Huh, cool. What's she like? Before I could answer, the crowd started the countdown. 10, 9, 8. With every second, more lights dimmed until it was almost dark. A trick of Yavin, I figured. 2, 1. Happy New Year! The room suddenly blazed with light, and sprinkles of glittering white paper fell from the ceiling like a confetti of snow. The crowd cheered wildly and applauded. People hugged their friends. Lilitha jumped at me and gave me a huge hug and a kiss full on the lips. Happy New Year, Jazz! She yelled, and she was grabbed by Jimmy, who picked her up and spun her around. The musicians launched to a rendition of Auld Lang Syne, the traditional New Year's song that had been sung since before the leaving, even though the meaning of the words had been long forgotten. I linked arms with Charlie on one side and Talgoth on the other, and we sung loudly along. Should old acquaintance be forgot, and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot, and Auld Lang Syne? End of part 2, yeah! End of 594AL. Yeah. Sweet bakes. How long has this been